it means. As we thought about today's call, we thought about, okay, how do we really want to approach this with the holidays coming and all of that means specifically for those of us in the church space. And then also the idea that coming out of that, we're thinking about what does 2023 look like? What are the things that we should be doing or have done? And because of the nature of the call, we've got guys and gals from everywhere. We've got leaders from all over the place, different spectrums as far as where you are in the strategic planning process. Some of you may be looking at 2023 and going, man, I've already kind of nailed that. I know a lot of you, I've been having conversations are kind of in the middle of nailing that. So one of the things we wanted to do today, Kay's going to share the screen and kind of put the deck up. And as we say always, this deck will come to you at the conclusion of the call. And you'll get this deck in your inbox at some point in the next 24 hours. So feel free to chat us up. Some of our team will be in the chat and they'll do their best to monitor that and to get things up there. But this deck will get to you. So don't feel like you've got to necessarily copy down anything that might be of interest to you. We're going to do two things today. We're going to talk about really 5 questions that we believe you should be asking as you look at planning 2023. And then we're going to pivot a little bit as we do on these think tank calls to a little bit more of personal and team development. And I'm going to turn it over to Kay and he's going to do some good stuff with you guys centered around Lencioni's new book, Working Genius, and the concepts around that. Maybe some of you have tapped into that already. Some of you haven't. Kay's deeply tapped into it. And so he's going to give us a little bit of that. So as you look at 2023, one of the things that we want to do is you're talking about like calendaring. Keep going forward, Kay, on the deck. You're talking about calendaring and you're doing all of those things. One of the things that's really important is for us to stay on target with all the things that we've talked about and the ideas that you have as far as who you want to be. So I want to ask these 5 questions. We're going to send these out to you guys so you'll get them. So Kate, kick that forward one more time. These are 5 hard questions that we believe you should stop and ask as you look towards and you plan 2023. There's actually 6, but I'll get to the 6th one in just a minute. We're going to chat it up a little bit in the chat as well as we ask these questions. So I'll pause after. So here's the first one. The first question is this. And we're actually going to include a tool that you may have seen already. And we're going to unpack it for a few minutes that actually goes along with the question. So the tools that you're actually going to see here, we're actually going to give you at the end of the call. So you'll actually get those tools that you can use with your team. Part of our goal is to equip you with that. All right. So you're sitting there with your team. I don't know how many of you have done this. Put it in the chat if you've already done it or you haven't done it yet. Let us know where you are in the process. We're not just talking about calendaring, but we're literally talking about what is our objectives for 2023? What do we want to accomplish as an organization? If we're using 10-year target, 3-year picture, 1-year plan, what does that look like? Have we clarified that? And so specifically, especially as you're thinking about calendaring, as you're thinking about rhythms, as you're thinking about that, these 5 questions, we think that effective teams and leaders will actually ask. All right. And it's not like, what should we be doing? Or is that a good event? Or should we do groups this way? Or those are important questions. These are much more macro work on it questions that will drive the work that you're doing in it. So here's question number 1. The question number 1 is, who are we targeting? Okay. So it's re-asking the question around who are we targeting? Number 1, on a macro level as a church, but I think secondarily, as your team starts to spitball things on the calendar, or you start actually looking at things that are in your ministry rhythm of your cycle, I think we would encourage you to go back and pause and ponder, who are we actually targeting? And one of the great tools, I'm gonna ask Kate to hit this for just a second, that we talk about when we talk about who are we targeting is something that we call spiritual spectrum. So, Kay, you want to talk about the spiritual spectrum just a little bit?
Yeah, the spiritual spectrum is an interesting tool. You might have discovered it in different ways. But what it's really does is gives us a framework and common language to be able to use. So basically the scale is that 0 is the point of conversion. A +1 would be a new believer. A -1 would be a seeker. A +5 would be a mature follower of Jesus. A -5 would be someone who's really antagonistic against God, right? So you get the scale here, the minus on the minus side and the plus side. Now, reminder, this is an internal tool. This is not an
Yes.
external tool. We don't want to label people as, oh, you are a -3, right? Like this is an internal tool that we can use to be able to actually assess, to be able to say, okay, hey, who are we targeting in our weekend services? Who are we targeting in our alpha or starting point? Who are we targeting in our life groups or community groups? Like, so that's a little bit of the introduction for the spiritual spectrum.
And stay unmuted, Kay, but one of the things that I think is interesting is how you could use this to actually, we've got a number of constructs we want to share with you today around this, but how you could actually challenge your team on this. So as your team is laying in things and they're feeling that motivation to impress you with, we're doing this and that and the other thing, it would be very important for you to ask that first hard question of who are we targeting with this activity? What are we trying to do? For example, Kay and I were with the church, the Bridge Church in Brooklyn, New York. And they actually, we lost our screen there, Kay. They actually said, we believe we are targeting, and help me with this, -4s whose mamas are +3. Their words, not ours. And so that was their target. And it actually drove a lot of our conversation as we were doing the strategic planning with them to go, that we believe that our number one target in our area is -4s on the spectrum whose moms are +3. So basically, in some of our other contexts, we would call that de-churched young professionals, right? But their mamas were +3, so they have some sort of that. So going back to our question, it's you sitting with your team and going, who are we targeting, and using the spiritual spectrum. Any thoughts on that? Unmute if you want to add to the conversation. We'll give you a few seconds to do that, or questions around it. Lynn, God bless all those mamas. That's correct. Okay.
We do it.
Question. Go ahead.
We do a thing with a master calendar when we plan out the whole year. We require our staff to say, hey, you can't just put something on the calendar without identifying who your target is using this tool. And that's been super helpful because people say, well, our target's -5 through +5. And it's like, that's not reality, guys. Let's actually have a target so we can evaluate. So it's a great evaluation tool as well as a front end tool.
That's
yeah,
cool,
and everything we're doing, Brandon, is on the right? We want things across the spectrum. We're not advocating for one or the other. But if everything we're number one doing is on one side, that should be a conversation, or vice versa. If there isn't anything that we're, if we're falsely claiming that something we're doing is for -3s, but in reality, the team around the table, if they were really candid, says, no, it's a +2 or a +3 thing, we need to know that. Right? We might say, oh, our small groups are designed for -2s. No, they're not, right? Like they're designed for +3s. So that drives some strategy. Okay, you want to add to that?
Well, the insight that I think was really helpful, let's say for the church in New York that just came from, was the fact that you can actually lay your mission statement on this spiritual spectrum. So people's mission statement might be helping people find and follow Jesus. Well, the find part is the minus side, and the follow part is the right side. Basically, our mission statements are all in some ways saying the Great Commission. And so it's baptizing them, and become disciples, right? So it's both sides of that. And so the revelation or the insight maybe could be that you put your mission statement and divide them into two in some sense to be able to say, okay, hey, we're about both sides. And so how are we doing? How are we evaluating? Are we being intentional in reaching both sides?
Let's go to question number 2, and please unmute and interrupt if you need to. I know we got a lot of people on the call, but we want to hear from you guys. So question number 2 is not only who are we targeting, but what are we communicating? And when I say communicating, what I mean by that is not just our communication like the emails. I'm not talking about physical communication, though that may be a deliverable of it. I'm talking about what are we communicating about ourselves by doing this, by putting this on our plan, by strategically pushing this. What are we communicating? It's basically saying, is this emphasis that we're doing Is this ministry moment that we're having, is this direction we're going, is it in alignment or is it in violation of our core values? So what is it communicating about us that we are doing this? Would be a really important secondary question for you to ask as you're populating a strategy for 2023. Okay, you want to add to that, Brandon, Jeff? We had a long conversation back in, I want to say February or March of this year around core values. So if you go back on our archives and you wanted to have a little more conversation around that, it's there. Okay, what's that tool that we have that's on here? We can maybe pull that up and they can see it. You know, asking the question, what are we doing to operationalize and embed the values? How much of these values are used in our decision making? Are our values currently actual or aspired? Right? Those are general questions. And then to go, there it is on the scale, right? So we generally, when we work with teams, we'll literally put their values up here and have the team tell us, are they more actual or aspired? Some of you have felt that pain. We've been in a room with you in the last few months and you've done this and it's been really revealing in good ways. It's okay to have aspirational values. It's okay, right? It just tells us there's room there for us to start to actualize those even more. But I'm thinking about, even as you guys, again, strategically plan, let's not go, values are great, they're on the wall in our hallway or in our lobby, but are they actually speaking to what we are doing? And can I boldly say this, guys, what we're not doing, what we're not going to do. This is an amazing thing that Jeremiah is doing in Minneapolis. Amazing. We're not going to do that because for us, we have a different value that we believe God's called us to live out as a church. That is okay, right? And actually really important for us to be. So who are we targeting? What are we communicating? Number three is what is it contributing? And the basis behind this question is, do we understand who our audience is and what they care about? And is it contributing to them connecting to Christ and connecting in community that's going to grow them? Right? So is it just something we're doing or is it actually contributing? What that means is you've got to filter everything you're doing through the lens of who that is, right? So again, in Brooklyn, if they're saying -4, right, or -3 with a +3 mama, then they're asking those questions. The other thing that was interesting is I was having a conversation, I don't know if Collins is on this call or not, around rhythm and the idea of like understanding people's rhythm of life in the community that God has placed us in, and then matching that rhythm alongside how we actually invite them and encourage them to be on mission with us and to live out that mission. I would ask you guys to actually boldly look at the stuff you're planning in 2023 and make sure that it's actually in rhythm with your community and what they care about and actually what their rhythms are in their personal lives. Because we can stand up and rant about their rhythms, but in reality, we need to be aware of them and then do our best to connect what God is doing through us to the rhythms of the other individuals that are around us. Anybody want to add to that?
Lee?
Yes, go for it. Unmute and go.
Yeah, I think it's a great conversation about, you know, that grid that you guys talk about, just what's effective, what isn't. I guess at one time I thought, like, you know, to reach people, you know, I wasn't thinking about the things that you do as a church that are like sometimes the traditions. I thought, well, maybe those things are not as valuable because, you know, you're not reaching necessarily, but I think that falls under that helping people grow, I guess, like that sense of community. Sometimes, like, we had a family movie night that was planned. It got rained out, but, you know, we had high hopes for that. We'll probably do it again in the spring when it's less likely to rain, you know, but just stuff like that for engagement. And then also for a community, bringing people out from, you know, the community that are not connected to our assembly yet.
And understanding those people and who they are is important, as Brandon's reminding us, like to understand who they are and what are the current things. Anybody else leaning into this at all or having conversations around who they are and what they care about that you've been given the privilege of doing ministry with? Anybody else want to address that or what's unique in your context? Cool. Let's go to number 4. I put up 4 fingers. That's right. This is a big one. You guys, a lot of you have been exposed to this. You love this tool, but we want to bring it back up again. It's the idea of not just who are we targeting? How is it contributing, right? What are we communicating? But fourth, what is it costing? And this is the ROI question. I think Brandon was actually referring to this particular tool in his last comment. It's the idea of, I want to be careful here, but I think it's important for us to understand that is what is it costing in the level of ROI, the return on investment. We like to use the idea of team. On the chart that you're about to see, it really breaks it down. On the left, again, you guys, a lot of you guys have seen this. It's the idea of let's measure resources, time, energy, attention, and even money, of course, that's key resource. So what we would encourage you to do as you look at evaluating 2023 is take everything that you do, that your team's doing, that you're planning on doing, that you have been doing. Kay placed it in the chat, and really have a conversation around, is it low or high? All of it, right? So is it taking a lot of time? Is it taking a lot of energy or not? Attention, we use attention as the term, like we have to market it. We have to talk about it. We have to give it attention everywhere, social media, communication, and then obviously finally money. And then you're on the bottom scale, on the x-axis, you're ranking, what do we believe is the actual impact towards the mission God has given us, low versus high. And we would ask you to place a dot on there based on not just how we feel, but a combination of narrative that we know, right? What's the person to person impact, but also pushing next to it the data that tells us something is actually happening and we have some measurements around that. And then by placing it in there, then these 4 quadrants come to be a reality. The quadrants from left to right, as Kate puts this up there, is the one on the left. He and I always argue about because I call it stupid and he calls it silly, but the same thing, right? I think stupid is a biblical term. Jesus said, "Don't be foolish." So
It's Brandon that wanted silly. For sure.
I know, because people got offended when we put stupid. But here's the thing: left to right, basically, it's the idea of if you're high resource and it's low impact, it's silly. If it's low resource, low impact, it's safe. If it's high resource and high impact, we want to be strategic about it. And if it's low resource and high impact, it is a significant thing we're doing, right? So the evaluation of this is, man, we want some things in that significant category for sure. Those are amazing things. And if we're highly resourcing it, we want to make sure that those things we're doing strategically. Okay, you want to add some thoughts and we'll open it up. We'll pause here for some convo.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if there's something that's in the safe, it's not costing us much from a resource perspective, and it's not impactful, then obviously you can do 2 things. You can raise the level of resources, you can add resources to it so that it actually can be strategic in some kind of way, right? So you can move something from the safe into the strategic, or you might find out, okay, keep the resources low, but how can we have the conversation to be able to bring it towards more impact and make it significant? So all that to say,
right,
just because it's in a box doesn't mean you're like, oh, get rid of it, ROI, it's not worth it. But you can actually have the beauty is in the conversation, have the conversation to be able to say, what would it look like for us to move it if we added more resources?
Anybody use this tool that wants to speak to it?
We've been using it a little bit, and I think you actually gave it to us before, but I think we're having this conversation and everything, including even upwards of like communications of just going, look, if we make everything, I don't know, safe, if we make everything safe, then we're not gonna hit it. And not like we should do things that are strategic, but again, if everything's a 10, then nothing's a 10. So I think it's kind of even looking at our entire calendar and even how, because every ministry wants us to make everything strategic, and they want us to all yell it from the stage and set up a table and do Instagrams and this and that.
Right.
And so for us, we're trying to go, look, actually the best thing for us is to find new and creative ways to make things and again, have some things that are safe, have some things that are significant and strategic, and just to kind of to balance it out like that. But
nothing should be silly, right, Jeff? Nothing should be stupid or silly. Like we should be moving on that. And we need to get it out of that box one way or the other. Either lower the resources. If you can't kill it, lower the resources and make it Just,
Yeah.
right, get it out of there.
Yeah,
I
and
don't recommend
I think
that.
that's what
Or get it
that's
right.
what you pushed us to do. That's what you pushed us to do. Of going, look, that's the danger box of you at least need to make it safe, if not something else.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jeff, to say that there actually is times where we need to have certain things in the safe bucket. Sometimes it's actually a rhythm thing. When you're looking at calendar for next year, it's like
Yep.
maybe you use the safe things to be able to really bring a good, healthy rhythm of this health and hustle paradox that we've been talking about too. But there's times where we're going to be heavy, high resources because it's going to be very significant or strategic. So yeah, I love that point.
Some of the stuff here at the crossing that we would put in that safe box Kay was just referencing would be some of our more secret menu things that we don't necessarily promote heavily. I'll give you an example here for us, like some of our smaller men's breakfasts or some of our ministry stuff like that. They're not really part of our holistic engagement plan, but we want them to still exist. There would be too much pain to not. So we just leave them in that safe, or at least middle range between safe and significant. They're not heavy resource. Some of the stuff that's significant, by the way, before we move on, kind of lends itself to the next question. Sometimes some of the safe stuff or significant stuff is actually things that has the most traction, right? Like some of your things that when you really get it moving along your pathway of moving people from outside the church to inside, some of your first steps, some of those things, they're actually really low resource when you get into a rhythm of it, but the payoff of significance behind them, if you do them well, is actually huge, right? And so some of those things is where it's really helpful. Let's get to the last question before I run out of time and yield my time. Last question is, what is it producing, right? It's the big question around, we talk about the priority of engagement, not just gathering. Is it producing movement, and is it on mission towards where we want to go? Right? I would encourage you guys to really, even if you're using the church on mission model or some adaptation of it, to really look at everything you're doing and try to figure out, is it have a significant role in moving people up there? By the way, back to the last thing I want to add, because Brandon put it in the chat. When we do that exercise with teams, we do not fill in the quadrants until they've already populated everything that you want to put up there. So you don't reveal the quadrants. You just say, let's populate it. And then you reveal the quadrants and have the harder conversations. All right. So those are the 5 questions. The 6th question before I turn it to Kay is this one. The extra question is really the most important one, is where is God leading us, right? And we want you guys to know, as we have these think tank calls, that though sometimes it feels like maybe we're heavy on strategy, that our given is that you guys are all in your context going to be led of the Spirit and then be aware of the strategy at the same time. These two are not in competition or contradictory. So we believe everything can be Spirit-led, can be directed through prayer, your team being directed, and then that can lead itself to be very aware of the strategy that we need to be doing. So I think the big ultimate question is, where is God leading us? But then I would strongly encourage you guys to ask those other 5 questions. And, you guys are leading teams. You've been put in a position of leadership that you've got to steward. Don't avoid these hard questions. Don't avoid them. They may lead to harder conversations around what you're doing or not doing. But if you're sitting in your office or in meetings and you're frustrated with all the work in it and what we're spending lots of time, energy on versus what it's producing, use these questions as a tee up to actually bring your team into the conversation and have things that are actually going to get you unstuck. All right. Any other comments? Maybe we'll unshare the screen for a second and let you guys just comment on all of that before we change the page. Anybody want to unmute and jump in? Talkative bunch.
I just want to say, just to follow up on that, like, for me, when you came and spoke to us in Houston, like, this was probably the greatest resource that I got out of that XY kind of grid to look at, productivity in a different way. And I appreciate the fact that you said also the emphasis on the Spirit. So, I mean, is that what you are talking about when you mean like a secret menu thing, that like that prayer initiative, or those kind of like that stuff that also is the lifeblood of the church?
Could be a lot. Yeah, it could be a lot of different things. I think the secret menu for us is more just the things that we don't have to use a lot of team, time, energy, attention, money on, right? So it's in that safe box. Now, I think some of that can become more significant if we're more intentional around it, right? Towards being on mission, but it probably lends itself to that safe box sometime. Chris Hall, we did this with your team a little bit. Before we pivot, speak to this a little bit, or where you are with it as you're in your planning, because you're a planning guru.
Yeah.
You like that? You like that?
No, I don't know if I'm a planning guru, but
Dude, you got more documents than anybody but Kay.
yeah, but we suck. So, yeah,
By
did an
saying you
exercise-
suck, you just endeared yourself to the other 40 people on this Zoom call.
We plotted out last year. We plotted out all of our programs on that spectrum. For us, it was the -5 to +5, to help us see like were we out of balance with our mission statement, because our mission statement does a lot very similar, like find and follow Jesus. So it kind of helped us, and it was really cool to see that we were actually leaning a little bit more towards the outreach side, which was really, really helpful. We did that at a top level leadership to see if we were out of balance. So the question that popped into my mind was, like, is there an elephant in the room, Lee, in your opinion, on the question of what is it costing when it comes to like Easter and Christmas Eve stuff? Those are high resource. I don't know about you guys, but as far as church growth goes, they don't move the needle for us very much. We might get some decisions, but I'd just be curious to see, like, is there an elephant in the room where we're spending thousands upon thousands for these special Sundays that don't really move the needle for us?
I'm going to be quiet and let some other people respond to that before some of our team does. Anybody want to respond to Chris or agree with him or where we're wrestling? Brent, you're smiling.
Yeah, so here's our issue in Fresno, California, is that we've been doing some things during the Christmas season that have actually worked out pretty well for us. And now we're noticing that others are doing what we've been doing because it seemed to be successful for us. And so now we're wrestling with just like, do we continue to add the resources yeah, we're literally getting advertisements right now, just not at the churches, but other city organizations.
Some of the uniqueness is now burned off on that, right?
And so just looking at these questions, we have a leadership team meeting tomorrow. We definitely need to, we could ratchet back some of what we were going to be doing to promote it now that others are kind of doing what we've been doing. So it's just something. I'm laughing because like this is where we're living right now.
I think part of it too is to go, that's great, Brent. Part of it too, Chris, is to really assess. Obviously you can take it down to safe, but the other option is you can go, we're spending some money, but towards what end, which I think is why those questions are good. It doesn't mean we necessarily should stop spending the resource, though that is an option, but it's also like, have we gotten lost in creating an environment that actually we've forgotten to ask the questions around, i.e. connection, engagement, follow-up, assimilation. Is this what I would call a goodwill event? Or is this actually something that's actually looking to move the needle for people spiritually? Because we do a couple things here at the Crossing and churches we work with that, if I was honest, I would title them goodwill events. Like they're really brand awareness. We're building brand awareness or endearment in the community. I'm not sure that's a terrible thing, but I think you have to assess and be honest about it, right? So if we're doing Christmas stuff, that's like, listen, we're doing this because people are going to come, they're going to feel good. It's a blessing to our community. Cool. Then we may adjust resources based on that. But if we're really doing something that we want to see people walk in the door or get engaged, then maybe the resources need to be reallocated. I can't answer that question. I'll defer to some of our other guys for everybody, but I think the question is a very, very good one. I think one thing I would say is sometimes anecdotal stories will trump real data. So when you go in and say, man, I don't know about this Christmas thing. And somebody will say, yeah, but remember 2 years ago, that family came and the kids all got plugged in and their marriage was restored. And that's true. I'm not being sarcastic, but that needs to be part of the conversation. But if it's one family in 4 years, is there better allocation of the ROI to that? Anything else?
You
Thanks,
guys,
Chris.
what Lee just said is so gold as a church leader, because we're so guilty of going, oh man, this one family showed up at our guest deal and they shared their story of getting baptized. Well, great. Let's keep spending $20,000 on that event that does nothing for our church and has no ROI. But we're so guilty of that. I'm pointing at myself, by the way. That is gold, what you just said. That was worth the whole call.
Thanks for saying exactly what I text you, Brandon. I appreciate that, buddy. Thanks for following that script right off, dude. Appreciate it. You messed up a little bit. We'll talk later. Okay, do your thing.
Yeah, I'll just wrap it up in this way. The biggest thing that people will ask about when they are presented this tool is, how do you measure impact? And it's so subjective, right? Like, I might see impact in a different way than another staff sees it. And so once again, there's no hard, line on this. Again, the beauty is in the conversation. But it is really interesting to be able to go beyond the anecdotal that Brandon just talked about and really be able to really see what the impact is. And so I think that's where it's super helpful. All right, we're taking a hard right turn and we're going to talk about Working Genius. And you might have seen this come out. Patrick Lencioni's new book is called The 6 Types of Working Genius. And here's the interesting thing about all of his books, and majority of the people who write books like this is what they do is they actually write the book. Then after they write the book, people read the book and then they find out, and they test it and they try the different things. And then there's a second revision, third revision to be able to incorporate all of the learnings after they've read the book and as institutions have implemented those things. Well, they decided actually to do this in a very different way than they've done in any other book. What they decided to do is actually they started this in COVID. And so you might have even taken the assessment a couple years before the book just came out this past month, right? And so they decided to do that so that they can get all the learnings in this past couple years and then incorporate into the book. So I thought that was really fascinating and really interesting the way that they did that. So the goal of the Working Genius is that you would find more joy and fulfillment in your work, that you would understand how other people are wired. But then the really unique one is that it actually raises your team's productivity. And so when I found out about this, a couple of years ago, and I took the assessment, I was like, wow, I want to be certified in this. I want to find out more about this so that because it was so helpful for me and the team that I've been working with. So the team's productivity is the interesting part, because this assessment is a little bit different than other assessments in the sense that it's 20% personality assessment, 80% productivity assessment or a productivity tool. So most things that we, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, all those type of things, it's personality assessment. And so basically what happens in those things, it's like, okay, now I know, some people put it on their office doors. Now I know what I'm walking into. Like, this is the way that they think, all that type of stuff, which is good and important, really good, important. But then how does that actually affect the progress of work? And so that's the other thing is that it's applied to work. It's basically the art of getting things done and how the team actually works to be able to do that together. And then the other thing that really is helpful about it is the simplicity of it. So I'm going to explain it to you, download it if you haven't, or if not familiar with it, or maybe a refresh on it. But basically, this is the 6 types of Working Genius, right? So the first Working Genius is the genius of wonder, and it spells widget, which is great. They didn't even intend to do that in the beginning, but it's a great way to be able to see the sequence and the order of it. So the first genius is the genius of wonder. This is the person who gets really energy from pondering things, asking questions, contemplating things, what they're wondering about. Why are the things the way that they are? Is there a better way to do that? Is this the most potential that we could achieve? People with the gift of this or this genius of wonder often don't think that it's a genius at all. I mean, they just kind of do it naturally. But in fact, it's actually the first step of any work that you should do. Someone has to say, why is it this way? Should we be doing it differently? And then they have to sit sometimes in ambiguity and imagine the possibilities, right? This wonder for the need of improvement, the change, or another way to say this is the why of why we're doing what we're doing for something, right? So that's the genius of wonder. Then it goes to the second genius, the genius of invention. This is the person that has the genius of invention that comes up with new ideas. where they're basically trying to solve the problem that the W, the wonder person, has pondering. So what they do is they say, well, that's a great question. Let me help solve that. I've got some ideas around that. They create these ideas to be able to help solve the wonder. That's the second stage. But then the third stage is now the genius of discernment. This is really important because this genius takes the ideas that the invention person came up with and then evaluates it. So this person has great instincts, gut, feel, intuition, right? And they naturally have this ability to be able to see the workability of an idea, right? Like they're looking at the solutions like, that's a great, I think that'll work, or man, I'm not sure. They're good curators of what's going on. They can recognize patterns. Discerners know how to connect the dots and give good feedback and those type of things. And so this is really looking at the workability of those ideas, right? Then it goes to the fourth one, which is the galvanizing. And I would, and you can probably guess which one Lee is, right? So galvanizing is the people that gets their energy by rallying people, inspiring them, getting people into the room, generating enthusiasm around an idea, and then let's go. Come on, let's move people. This is a great idea. We need people. Let's do it. Let's go. It's inspiring people, organizing people, getting people moving. That's the G, galvanizing. Then it goes to the E. E is enablement. Now, enablement has a really bad connotation, doesn't it? Like we don't want to enable people. And yet this is in a very, very positive connotation, right? It's a redemption of the word in a lot of sense because people who have this don't think that they're a genius, but they're actually responding to the galvanizer of what they're being galvanized towards. Think it's a great idea and says, I know how to help. I want to provide that help. I want to help you accomplish that. These are the people that anticipate what people need and provide that help. And in the way they need it, in a way, they actually even do it on the other people's terms, not on their own terms, right? So this is a genius. And some people that have this think that they're nice or conform or all those things, but it's critically a part of the genius of enablement. And then the last one is the genius that is needed for any type of work, which is the genius of tenacity. This is the people who get joy and energy out of finishing things, crossing things off the list, making sure that they've hit that standard of what we're trying to do and making sure that we're accomplishing it. Now, this is so critical because this is where things really finalize and get things done. So there's 6 working geniuses, 6 steps in any process: wonder, then invention, then discernment, then galvanizing, then enablement, and then tenacity. Now, I want to play this out for a second because, for example, let's say you walked into a Starbucks. Some of you guys are in Starbucks just right now, and you're like, wow, this system in which they're doing the lines and everybody's like crossing each other and stuff like that. I wonder if there's got to be a better way. That's the W person. The I person would go in there and say, well, I wonder if they should do it this way or this way or this way. I would not do it this way. In fact, I would do it this way, right? So they're coming up with the ideas to solve the solution of the problem that the W is thinking. The D person says, out of all those ideas, here's the best idea. This is my gut. This is my intuition that I think that this is the best idea because X, Y, Z. The G people says, all right, guys, we've decided to do this in a new way. Let's do this. We're going to go. Come on, do this. You do this, right? Like, let's go. That's the G galvanizing part. And the E person's like, all right, whatever you need, I'm here. I'll help you accomplish that and do that. And the T is like, all right, we said we were going to do something and we haven't done it yet. Are we going to do this? Can we get it done? You know, so they're going to push it across the cross line. So this is the working genius, WIDGET. And as you can see, everything that you do in leadership and even in personal life, right? Everything starts in this way. You might look at your backyard and like, gosh, I wonder if we should do something different. And here's some ideas. And here, let's discern that. And now let's get people around that. Let's support that and let's finish it, right? So everything has to do with this flow of work. And people have geniuses in these areas. Then to be able to identify what yours is and specifically where your team is really helps clarify how you can contribute towards that process. So I said a lot there, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Some of you guys are familiar with this. Even if you're in a Starbucks, you can unmute. You know, I would love to hear. Anybody? Who's done this before? Who knows their genius? JP, what's yours? Curious.
My genius was wonder and enablement.
Wonder enablement. Yeah, tell me about that. Do you
Uh,
resonate with that?
Yeah. I feel like that those kind of like you mentioned for both of them, both wonder and enablement are two that you don't always think of as geniuses. So I think to be able to recognize both of those as geniuses and then recognize my own proclivity towards them was really encouraging and something that is good. In my role, I think my two frustrations would be galvanizing and tenacity, which is tough, I think, in being a lead pastor, senior pastor. Like I'm like, oh, I wonder what we could do, and oh, let me help you, but then a lot of things don't always get done, and so that can be a frustration for the team and for myself as well. I wanted to get things done, but
and yet at the same time, to be able to leverage the team or the people who are have geniuses in those areas. That's good. Jeremiah, you are what? What did you say there? You are DG.
He's a galvanizer. He's cool.
That's right.
He's important.
Yeah, DG, right? So Jeff is GD as well. Lynn, Sherry is ET, right? And husband is WI, right? So all that's to say, we all have working geniuses. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. This process actually has three phases. The WI, if you're in the WI category, you're more in the ideation stage of work. The DGs are more in the activation stage of work, and the ETs are more in the implementation stage of work. So these stages of work actually really help us understand where we're coming in towards the body of work that we're trying to accomplish, right? And so here's the interesting thing about the stage of work is that what we see in most organizations, including churches, is that they're high on ideation and high on implementation, and they many times skip activation, or they don't spend enough time in activation. So what they do is they might have an idea, or they might have a problem that we're trying to solve, or might have something out there, or maybe even borrow it from someone else, and then they're ready to implement it without actually doing the hard work sometimes, or the necessary work of doing the D and the G, of deciding, is this the best thing? How are we going to do this? And G, how do we rally people around this? And let's make sure that we do this so that way everybody's on board versus just pushing things and getting it done, right? So there's the ideation phase, the activation stage, and the implementation phase. So that's one aspect of it. The other is when you do a deeper dive, this is some of the stuff that we learned in the training, is that there are ones that are responsive, and then there's others that are disruptive. Okay, this is what this means. The WDEs are all responsive geniuses, and the IGTs are disruptive. So that means that the responsive are the ones that are responding to the world or the ideas around them or to the needs of the college. So the wonder responds to the environment, looks around, and basically is responding to them and saying, I wonder if there's got to be a better way. A D is discerning and responding to the I, the invention people, right? Or the ideas of that. And the E is responding to the galvanizer. They're galvanizing them towards doing these things, right? But the D, the disruptive, or the disruptive parts is the IGEs, right? So invention actually is disrupting what we used to do, right? So it's bringing new ideas to solve new problems. The G is galvanizing people towards something that they were doing, like maybe even pushing against their comfort zones to be able to say, no, this is the way we're going. And then the T is actually disrupting even just what they're doing, the intensity of the standards, all those stuff for completion, right? We're making sure that we're gonna complete this thing. So your geniuses, your two geniuses, you've got two geniuses. Your two geniuses might actually be in 1 and 1, like one responsive and one disruptive. Some people have double responsives and some people have double disruptives. And you can actually see how that would actually play among your team or even the personalities around that. So that's one thing. And then this is the last deep dive of something that I think is really important, is the altitudes of the geniuses. So the W is actually 30,000 foot, 25,000, 20,000, 15,000, 10,000, 5,000. All that to say, it's like you're starting up here with the Y, like there's a problem here. Ideas, discerning, galvanizing people towards that, enabling, and then getting it done, right? So there's this elevation. Now, here's the fascinating thing about this, right? Is because what happens many times in your meetings, in the midst of your projects, is you might go from, hey, we're dreaming about something, and then all of a sudden somebody comes all the way to the bottom. Oh, can you guys hear me okay? You guys there? Okay. You guys might be wondering and creating some ideas, and then somebody who has the ET comes in and says, all right, how many of those do you need? And how are we going to accomplish that? And there's no way we're going to do that, right? Like, so we went from an elevation change from 30,000 all the way down to like a 10 to 5,000. And we're like, no, wait, we're just dreaming here. We're just brainstorming here, right? And so when there's an elevation change, there's this huge turbulence that happens, right? And so you got from a 20,000 foot all the way down to like a 5 in a matter of minutes. And that takes a lot of energy actually to go back and forth. And so when I was doing this a couple of weeks ago with some teams, they're like, that describes us a lot. Sometimes in one meeting, we'll go back and forth between this elevation all the way down here and back up and all those things. And so what some organizations have done is they say, hey, this meeting is a WI meeting. We're just ideating right now. We're not going to get into the implementation of the ET stuff. We're just ideating. And they even put it in their calendar title as this is a WI meeting. Or maybe the opposite is true. Hey, you're 90% way through the project. Like you've planned Easter and you're all the way to the execution. You're at the ET stage. But then sometimes somebody who has the W or I comes in and says, hey, I got a new idea, right? And they're like, wait, we're all the way down here and Lee has taken us all the way up here. And now I'm airsick because of the turbulence that happens, right? So all that to say, it's like sometimes the expectations of us saying, hey, what is this meeting at? What is the what's the hat that I need to come into this meeting for? So that's been super helpful for people as well. So all that to say, like there's a lot of stuff in here, but you know, you can use it for the implementation of a project. When you're talking about Easter, hey, start with the W, go all the way through the phrases. Sometimes you might have to backtrack, right? Or even the purpose of your meetings or the altitude of the meetings. Be very, very clear about that. Borrow geniuses. If you don't have specific geniuses, borrow those geniuses to be able to fill in those gaps. And then understand that every job is a 6-letter job, right? Like we all have to do all parts of this, but we have to lean into our strengths and our geniuses around that. So that's in a nutshell, the 6 working geniuses. I would recommend the book. And if you want to do
We
a
put
deep
the
dive,
link in there. Oh, look, there's an assessment. Go, okay.
yeah, if you want to do a deep dive, you know, on that, please let me know, reach out. I'd love to help. And I got a coupon code here that you could use 20% off on the assessment if you want to take it, or you want to share it with your team or other people as well. But that's the working genius. I think
Katie, there's a question in
super
the chat that I want you to address
Sure.
before we wrap up. But JP was asking, like, how do you actually manage meetings in your best assessment as far as who you invite to meetings based on the type of meeting that you're doing, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's what JP is alluding to. Do you actually think about that as you look at what work on it, work in it, you know, the
Yep.
different terminology?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things is I would say that, yes, consider the people in the room, but at the same time, the clarity of the expectation of the room is most important, because I think that people can put on a different hat, especially in their competencies, even if it's not a genius for them. but it's the expectation that sometimes is not there on the front end. So then they're sadly disappointed on the back end, right? So some of this clarity, even with teams, is like, hey, and they were an ET. If I know that this is just a brainstorming and I don't have to figure out how many we got to buy, then I'm okay with that. But just tell me on the front end, right? So I think that expectation on the front end, I think, is helpful.
Okay, there's a lot of G's in the chat. I know you haven't had a chance to look at the chat. Is that typical, like based on the leadership that's on this kind of a call, and there's not a lot of, I didn't see a lot of E's or T's. There's a few, but not many.
Yeah, I mean, what Patrick Lencioni would say is that it's not specific to jobs necessarily. At the same time, there are certain characteristics and geniuses that work and match better for jobs too. So definitely, I mean, when you think about, let's say, for example, lead pastors who have to galvanize every single week towards, getting people to do something that they don't want to do, right? Like that's a helpful gift, right? It's a helpful genius. So yeah, that's what I would say too.
Lynn says she sucks because she's an ET.
I would say I will hire you today.
She does not suck. We would hire you right now.
Well, sometimes they can totally be a dream killer. And I have literally said to my husband, I don't want to hear another freaking idea until we actually finish the one you came up with.
That's an
6
ET.
months ago.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, and this will be in the deck. You'll see what those pairings called. In an ET is called the loyal finisher, right? That's totally, somebody who we can rely on. Yeah.
Please send your resume. I'll send you my email. Please send your resume.
Well, Kyle Beach already hired Lynn. She already got hired.
Yeah, Lynn, this is what I would say around that. I have sensed that and seen that in different people around, like, gosh, it sounds so boring. It sounds so, and almost in some organizations, we take advantage of the T's. And this is where the clarity and understanding of the team dynamics, does they say, no. Every person has to do all 10 or all 6 of these. You have to do, every job is a 6-letter job. But at the same time, we do need those T's to be able to help accomplish. So it's not, it's what you're teeing towards, right? So you might be, I wouldn't say you're a T or just use your T for, getting things done from an administrative perspective. No. The T that's I've seen really effective from an executive perspective is that, hey, we are on point as far as getting after the strategy, and you're going to keep us towards that, right? So it's how you use the T at every level that I think could be redeemed, instead of it seeing like, no, this is just boring or this is not. So maybe.
Okay, last question. We got to get off, but a lot of people are asking, like, we obviously use thinking wavelengths when we're doing a 2-day S&P. Our team is with your teams. You've done it. We do that. We love that. We think that's a key essential part. And then, but people are asking, like, there's so much other stuff out there, and I know you're a fan of all of it. Why would you say this may be a great complement to like a thinking wavelengths or something like that?
Yeah.
From what you know so far.
We love thinking wavelengths. We do it in every strategic momentum process. This would be probably thinking wavelength 2.0, in the sense that literally it gives you some tangibles around some of those things. It has a lot of parallels to the thinking wavelength. So if you already know your thinking wavelength, it basically is almost even opposite, like the opposite way of the thinking wavelengths. So that's what I would say. And the other thing is leverage all of it. I mean, all those things are so important, but this is the only one that I've seen that's really around work and productivity. So towards how we can accomplish, something. So I think it's a different scan and different purpose.
Love it. Hey guys, we want to honor your time as leaders. We know you guys have got different things that you're doing. So before we sign off, just to wrap it up, a couple notes. Make sure that your information that we have is around the think tank call. You should have got a text today as a reminder. Again, our strategy is we send you a calendar invite. That's mostly because we want you to have it in your calendar and not just have to remember. So we hope that that's not too annoying to you, but we just want to send you that invite with the notification. If you're not getting that, let us know. Secondly, the only text we're trying to send you is day of, just to kind of be a reminder and actually give you a little sense of content. And then finally, on the deck, there is an invite that we continue to put. So if you have people that on an executive level that would be beneficial, that would benefit from this conversation, please send them that form, which will auto invite them and get them into the process of looping through. As you guys think about next year, we'd love to partner with you in any way we can to help you with your teams as you're planning. If those 6 questions we asked earlier kind of motivated, like, hey, we need to spend a day and a half, 2 days with our team, we'd love to do that with you guys, but we're here just to help you. So anything that we can do to resource you guys, we would love to do that. All right. Cool, man. We won't talk until after Thanksgiving. So we're grateful for all of you guys. So have a great one. Okay. That's all we got.
Thanks,
Go
guys.
get the email. Peace out. Lynn, you don't suck.